Sypha was excited for the chance to finish up her drawing of Adrian. This was her last required class for drawing, and she was ready to be done. Thanks to her best friend, she had an appreciation for everything that went into the process now, but it would never be her medium. Sypha lived for digital art, and that would always be where her heart and her talent lay. The process of creation in a digital environment was like magic to her, a conversation with the universe of collective minds inside her computer. When she could conjure pure magic out of herself and cast it into the cosmos of the digital world, there was nothing better. It was enchanting and intoxicating. She would miss the opportunities to get Adrian down to his brief stuff. The man was an artwork of his own, a masterpiece of genetics, and the literal come of the angels. Damn, was he ever. I would just like to bite him right on that collar. Stop it, she thought, feeling guilty. That's not fair to him. Sypha had been attracted to Adrian right from the start, but he's always been oblivious. Normally, she was upfront with those she desired, but he was different. When she'd first laid eyes on him in their class, he seemed so untouchable and ethereal. Translation. Way the fuck out of my league, she thought, and mounted the steps to the building. They'd been paired up in the class, and by the time the joint project was done, they were friendly. When Adrian walked her back from a party where she'd had too much to drink 2 weeks later, politely extricated himself from her horrible come-ons without shaming her, and easily accepted her jokes about it the next day, they crossed the line into friendship. And Sypha had tucked her unrequited attraction away. Adrian had never given her any reason to believe he would be interested in changing their relationship or that her desire might be returned. Most of the time, she could even let her ever-present longing for him fade into the background, but when she was drawing him, it was hard to. He was just so damn beautiful, and she was concentrating on all that perfection. They traded off modeling for each other because the cost of models was so high. Every once in a while, they would pool in for one with a group, but that was hard. You had to agree on the pose, and the model had to be okay with a shared fee. When he first asked her to trade modeling, shy but hopeful, she practically panted with anticipation. And I had not been wrong, she thought, remembering the first time she'd seen all that lovely skin, long limbs and flowing hair under the spotlights. But there'd been nothing there for him, and it had been painfully obvious. Not nothing, she corrected. He loves me very much, just as a friend. She could pinpoint the moment in their relationship that they'd moved to best friend status. She'd had a class with Adrian, and they usually went for a picnic after, so they could discuss the classmate with the purple hair that they both thought was hoot and gossip about the moron in third row. That day, as they exited the building, a long black limo was idling at the curb, and Adrian had sworn under his breath. "What is it?" Sypha asked Adrian, eyes snapping back to him from the high sheen of the dick-compensating limo. It was shiny, long and sleek, and seemed to scream, "Look at my penis!" Sypha was looking. She liked cars, and this one was no exception. Her friend sighed, an unhappy sound, and firmed his mouth. "That limo is here for me!" Sypha laughed and then stopped, looking at Adrian's resigned face. Holy shit, for real? Why? A small smile played around his pale, full lips, and Sypha ignored the answering flutter in her belly. She loved when he looked at her like that. "You know, I don't think I ever mentioned the fact that I love that you had no idea who I was when we met." The smile expanded, and his dimples winked. "That it didn't matter to you then, and it seems like you've always forgotten it when it comes up? I adore it. I adore it. It makes me hopeful I can just be me to everyone else someday." The sound of a car door opening broke the spell, and they both turned. A nonsensically tall man with a regal and elegant bearing emerged from the vehicle as though he'd just formed from it instead of climbing out. He was a looker if he went for tall, dark, and handsome, Sypha thought. The man's full suit and Inverness cape made him look like he was on his way to an opera. It should have been silly, and instead it just seemed right. "Adrian," the man said, a note of delight in his voice. "I know him from somewhere," Sypha thought absently. "Father, how good of you to come see me," Adrian said, and strode down the steps to embrace him. Sypha gasped. "Oh shit, of course." Her eyes widened. "This is Vlad Dracula Tepes. I'm such a dumbass. Holy hell." Adrian was right. She never remembered this was his father, probably because Adrian's coloring was the complete opposite of Vlad's. Supposedly, the blonde looked more like his mother in that regard, but at the time, Sypha hadn't looked her up yet. But if you looked at Vlad and Adrian together, you could see the resemblance in the height, build, and especially the smile. Actually, Adrian's penchant for black flowing clothing seemed to be inherited too. "Father, I would like you to meet Sypha Belnades." Adrian turned to her and held out his hand. "An extraordinarily gifted artist, and my best friend." Best friend? Sypha had thought, touched, warmed, and honored. She just let it go in the moment. But at the earliest opportunity, she commented how lucky she was to have a best friend like Adrian to Vlad, and the two men had smiled. After that, it was just natural between them, and their friendship had opened up. Sypha had shared her anxiety over pleasing her parents but wanting to follow her heart. How their inability to understand her hurt her sometimes. Adrian had explained his love for his father and his frustration at Vlad's overprotectiveness. Vlad's belief that Adrian's art was wonderful but unpragmatic, and how belittling it felt even when he knew his father didn't mean it to be. Sypha had talked about her sexual conquests, and Adrian had told her about how he was holding out for the right person. That conversation had tested her intention to be respectful of his boundaries. Had it ever, she thought now, climbing the stairs to the drawing room. Thinking it might help her unrequited love and Adrian's feelings of self-worth, she kept an eye out for someone suitable. Which led her to Trevor Belmont. Hopefully right into his arms, she thought with a sly grin. She found him captivating, cagey, gorgeous, funny and arrogant. Surprisingly sweet and thoughtful too, she'd discovered after he apologized for the scene with Adrian. In short, he was hot and she wanted to test drive the shit out of him. The problem was that he and Adrian seemed to hate each other. Nothing I can't fix with the right plan and the right attitude, she thought. She wasn't willing to give up either man. She loved Adrian deeply. He was very important to her. Unless she was mistaken, she could see her friendship with Belmont evolving into something long-term too. I will have both in my life, she thought, and rehearsed the things she wanted to say to Adrian on just this matter. She took a deep breath and turned the doorknob to the art studio. Trevor waited. Rebear! Waited. Alucard waved the last student off with an easy smile and then turned back to the still life. He stared at it for a moment, and Trevor wondered if the TA had forgotten he was there. One long hand played with the gold chains, lovingly nestled on his chest. Then, with a deep breath, Alucard turned to him. Why are you taking this class? Alucard asked him, and Trevor tensed. At least the painter's tone had been respectful. Because I have to. Believe me, I don't want to be here either, he responded in a short, clipped voice. He kept his hand draped over the top of the easel, eyes on that long frame sheathed in black. Is there another class you could transfer to? Alucard asked, practically pleading. Trevor almost felt bad, but then reminded himself that this brat always got what he wanted. He shook his head, and Alucard's face became even sadder. Probably the first time he's ever heard no, the sculptor thought, and hardened his heart. If Trevor had to suffer, Alucard did too. Could you drop it and re-register next term? It's a different teacher, Alucard said, fingers now twisting in the little gold chains. That pissed Trevor off. He wouldn't even think about the 25% non-refundable loss, Belmont thought, when it would be the difference between graduating or not. I have better things to do with my time and my money, Alucard Tepes. Trevor enjoyed the narrowing of the TA's eyes. Some of us aren't here for shits and giggles. I am not dropping this because you don't like me. Deal with it. Look, if this is about the money, the 25% tuition, I can... Alucard started, and Trevor saw red. He surged up, pencils clattering on the floor, and stepped around his easel. Do not ever offer me money like you know me, or you can buy me. His fists clenched, and he struggled to remember. He'd told Sypha he would try not to hit Alucard ever again. Thank the stars I didn't promise her, he thought. That I had known better than to promise. I'm not for sale, and you'd better... I'm sorry. Trevor blinked. Excuse me, what? Truly, I am. I didn't mean it that way, but I can understand it sounded like it. Alucard didn't look at him, but his apology was quiet and sincere. The TA's hands stilled, and he fell silent. Yeah, Trevor said, fully aware he sounded as surprised as he felt. Alucard's eyes flicked up to his, and for a moment, Belmont was lost inside a glittering cave of gold that felt like an endless stream flowing into the unknown. Uncomfortable? Trevor looked away first. Yeah, okay, he said, and bent down, making a show of picking up his pencils. He couldn't have been more surprised when Alucard squatted beside him and picked them up with him. Here, the blonde said and offered the three he'd retrieved. Trevor stared at his hand, noticing the long, gracefully tapered fingers, the tiny black smudges from his charcoal, the fine bones in his wrist. He's beautiful, he thought again. This time, it wasn't chased with immediate resentment, but confusion. Trevor reached out to take the supplies, and his fingertips brushed Alucard's palm. A wave of awareness swamped him, alarming, exciting, and uncertain. Trevor's eyes shot back up to Alucard's. Oh! The painter wasn't looking at him, he was looking at their still hands, hovering over each other. His lashes are insane, Trevor thought, literally impossible. If they weren't so close, he would have thought they were fake. But the color and the close proximity left no doubt that they were real. Trevor's fingertips itched to brush over their silky length. I need to know if you are going to respect my authority in this class. If you are going to complain to Professor Shaft about me. Alucard's voice broke Trevor's trance and jerked him back to reality. This man despised him and looked down on him. He would do well to remember that. But his apology, Trevor started to think, and then shut that down. There had been too many times in his life that he'd given the benefit of the doubt and it had bitten him in the ass. Besides, Alucard had already made his opinion abundantly clear. Still, he knew that professors would take their TA's recommendations and observations into consideration. He needed to pass this class. Financially, time-wise, and emotionally, he couldn't afford to take it again. I won't complain if you treat me like any other student. Respecting your authority? Well, that depends. I give respect when it is earned. Trevor took the pencils and stood. Alucard looked up at him, and for a moment Trevor had a scorching image of what the man might look like, naked. Kneeling in front of the sculptor, eager to please, with those parted lips and wide, knowing eyes. Oh fuck, don't go there, he thought frantically. How would someone earn your respect, Belmont? Alucard asked him with that tone of disapproval and disdain. For some sick reason, Trevor was getting to like it. Unbidden and unwelcome, Belmont's brain helpfully answered, That's easy, you can suck my... The doorknob rattled. Adrian was attracted. It was horrible. He couldn't pretend anymore, and it was going to be a problem. It already was a problem. When Trevor had touched his hand, it'd been like nothing the painter had ever felt before. It left him breathless, and he barely suppressed his shiver. He had no idea why it had felt like Trevor had just licked over his hand, but that was what it felt like. Well, at least I think that's what it would feel like, Adrian thought. No one had ever licked his palm or any part of his body, so he could only guess. Why did it have to be him? He wondered again, as he looked up at Belmont and waited for an answer to his question. Why wouldn't it be? His desire answered him. Look at him, he's captivating. It was true. Trevor looked down at him like a commanding warrior, all demanding tension, intense aura, and battle-ready stance. He was so still that his chains didn't even clink and slide, which they'd done all class. What do I have to do to earn your respect? He asked again, silently. It was the eternal question for Adrian, and he hated asking it. It ripped him open, left his guts strewn everywhere. It was the question he asked himself every art opening, every scholarship application, every disagreement with his father. Every time he asked it of someone, Adrian was really asking it of himself. For the 1000th time in his life, Adrian told himself that he had no reason to feel this way, to feel like a liar in his own life, a sad bird on a windowsill shivering in the cold, a child left behind at the gas station. But he did. He told himself that it was silly to feel this way. He told himself that he was loved and had no bad thing in his history that could explain this feeling. Others had it far worse than he did, and his entire life had been blessed with enormous privilege. Take Sypha, for example. She was enormously talented, dedicated, and had an obviously successful future ahead of her. Her parents weren't wealthy and weren't connected. While she had some financial support from them and scholarships, she knew there was no safety net behind her. She had to make it on her own and knew it. Knowing the pressure and expectation on her, she had every reason to have a chronic anxiety disorder, but she didn't. She was cheerful, outgoing, sweet, and generous. When she befriended him, he couldn't believe it. People like Sypha never wanted to be his friend, unless they thought he could connect them to the lifestyle of his parents. But she didn't want that from him. He'd watched for it. It never came. When she'd finally realized he was that Alucard Adrin Tepes, well, she'd laughed and said she needed to work on paying attention sometimes. By the time she'd gifted him the little comic she'd made of them as two bats roosting, he'd realized that somehow he'd found a friend that wanted him for himself. The little comic, which she'd titled Bat Company, was just as cute and funny as Sypha was. A truly outrageous caricature of their faces. It hung beside his mirror so he could see it every day and know that he was profoundly lucky. He told her once that he loved that she didn't seem to care about his family connections, but he really should tell her again. It meant everything to him. It meant that when she told him that she loved him and felt lucky to be his best friend, he felt cherished. When she told him that he was a good person who was more than enough just by being himself, he believed her. It meant that when she joked that they should just get married already because he was the only one who understood her, he knew that she literally meant it, that they were close, in spite of his Tepes connection. Adrian was damned lucky to have her as his friend, much less to have her feel the same way. Sypha had every reason in the world to ridicule him for his feelings of inadequacy and struggles to feel validation, but she never did. She never got tired of hearing the same old misery or vulnerabilities. She never threw it in his face or belittled him. Frankly, it was some of his conversations with her that helped him realize where some of it came from. Adrian was sensitive to the needs of those he loved. Disappointing them was terrifying, which is why it should have been obvious to him that some of this feeling came from his relationship with his father. He knew that while his father loved him, Vlad would never understand Adrian. In fact, his father loved him so fiercely that it made Adrian guilty about needing his own path. It made him resistant to accepting his father's money and connections, or leveraging his influence and fame. Sypha had helped him understand that sometimes it is harder to have the disappointment of someone you love and you know wants everything good for you, than it is to have the disapproval of someone you despise. Speaking of someone you should despise, why do you care about Belmont's respect? Adrian asked himself, looking up into a tense, tanned face with eyes so blue they seemed to shatter the stillness with insistence. He wasn't going to lie to himself. His churning guts said it all. You care because you love this class and you don't want to lose it, he thought. You care because Sypha asked you to give him another chance. You care because it's obvious she's into him and you don't want to lose her. You care because you just really want to get closer to Belmont, to know him better than anyone else. The doorknob rattled before it opened and they both looked over. There she was, bright, bouncy, and grinning. Sypha brightens everything wherever she is and whatever she is doing, he thought, his face instinctively forming into a smile. He knew Sypha thought she looked like a boy, but it couldn't be further from the truth. She was petite, gently rounded, and looked like a mischievous fairy. With wide blue eyes, vibrant orange-red hair that she always grumbled about letting grow too long, and an electric smile, she turned heads. Her features were not conventionally pretty, but it was the lightness of her heart that transformed them. She literally sparkled with energy and happiness, and people responded to her like she was an ice cream cone at a 3-year-old's birthday party. Sypha was always neat and put together. Her style tended to be colorful but comfortable, and today was no exception. She wore blue corduroy overalls with a plethora of buttons on the straps. Knowing Sypha, they would range from art-supporting quotes to LGBTQ2+ positive to video game characters. He was pretty sure he saw a Star Trek pin in there too, actually. Her rainbow-striped crop top was a favorite of his, flattering, sweet, and completely her. The usual green Converse peeked out from the overalls. "Stop poverty!" written across their tops in permanent marker. A wide-brimmed felt hat completed the look. Sometimes Sypha would dabble with makeup, but usually only for parties. Today she must have felt playful because she had bright red lipstick on. "Hey Adrian, I needed to ask you about..." "Oh!" Sypha stopped, grin slipping into a curious quirk of her brow. What's going on, guys? Is this a bad time?" When neither of them answered her immediately, her smile became naughty. "Can I watch?" Well, that's interesting, Trevor thought, intrigued. She obviously meant it in jest, but he was surprised Sypha would make a joke like that with Alucard, that she'd even considered the possibility. He should have known someone as fascinating and unconventional as Sypha Belnades would have no qualms about a menage a trois. For that matter, Belmont didn't necessarily either. He'd just never considered it. His eyes slid over her and flicked back to Tepes. "Oh, I'd seriously consider them both," he decided with brutal honesty. It made him think about possibilities that didn't help Belmont calm down his fantasies about Adrian, like Tepes struggling in passion while the blonde's face was close to Sypha's. That would be a great view, and as a bonus, Adrian wouldn't be able to talk. That might be a nice change of pace, he thought with a smirk. Actually, Trevor reconsidered, I would love to hear him beg. That snooty Duchess voice all needy and desperate. Those dark notes of seduction filled with desire and anticipation. Whether for Trevor to fuck harder or for Sypha to thrust into his mouth, it didn't matter. Either would be extremely satisfying. If he turned and kissed me, I could imagine the mix of their presence. What would it feel like together? Hey, not doing yourself any favors here, he thought, and was grateful for his baggy t-shirt. Sweet thing, you know I always like an audience, Trevor said smoothly, breaking the silence. He took the opportunity to lean down to replace his pencils and make a small adjustment to the pressing issue in his pants. But why watch when you could join in? Let's not waste a mouth as clever as yours. Alucard still hadn't moved, and Trevor was pretty sure the man was dying from shock. Tepes had gone paler than normal and was just staring at Sypha like she'd sprouted a crown of broccoli. Fuck it, Trevor thought recklessly, and offered the TA his hand. Alucard's eyes snapped back to Belmont and he looked almost dazed. Yep, he's horrified. Trevor held in his snicker, cocked an eyebrow and said, What do you think, Legs? Bet I could make you say my name so nicely. Adrian is always nice, Sypha said, closing the door behind her and setting her bag down. Alucard finally took his hand, and there was a zing of sensation up Trevor's arm. The man's cool and smooth skin settled against Trevor's calluses and rough palms. I bet his skin is like this all over, Trevor thought, and tried to think about something else. He seized on the first thing that came to mind. What is your actual name? I thought it was Alucard, but Sypha. He looked over at her before looking back. And your students, they call you Adrian. The blonde just stared at him like Belmont had whipped out his dick and slapped it on his face. Now that's a pretty thought, Trevor groaned inwardly. Coming up, he asked Teepees, and Adrian's body clearly showed he was already ready. That question seemed to break the TA's reverie, and Alucard practically leapt up. The TA dropped Trevor's hand like it was about to explode. Oh, yes, thank you. Hello, Sypha, how lovely to see you. He looked lost and then gave a tiny shiver. My name? It's both. Well, sort of. Alucard looked around abruptly, backed up, and sat down on the stool beside him. It's both, Trevor prompted, amused by Alucard's flustered state. What's the matter, Teepees? Afraid I could make you say my name when you came? Trevor didn't want to think about why he really wanted to find out if it would be a broken whisper or a choked wail. Remember, he thinks you aren't worthy of being here. He thinks you are a nobody. Trevor felt the tense of his shoulders in response to that thought. He really was trying to remember that. Yes. My full name is Alucard Adrin Tepes. Professionally and legally, I go by Alucard Tepes. I have to, he shrugged. My parents, my friends, and usually everyone just calls me Adrian. The only people who use Alucard regularly are my professors, professional contacts, or, his eyes flicked to Trevor, and he seemed to steel himself a little, those who think my familial ties should be highlighted for some reason. The way Tepes had said familial ties was very interesting, even more that he clearly preferred the more informal name, saying he had to go by Alucard. He was an adult. Tepes could change it if he wanted to. Why a drawing if they were just going to call you Adrian though? Trevor asked, curious now. Alucard sighed deeply, and before Trevor could even bristle, Sypha spoke from behind him. Adrian's father, his middle name, is Dracula. Alucard is Dracula backwards. Trevor turned to her, eyebrows raised. Adrian is his mother's maiden name, Sypha continued as she pulled out a rolled-up drawing from her bag and started to clip it to an easel. It's a family thing, reusing names and such. As soon as Adrian could speak, he started insisting on Adrian. Can't blame him. I'd want my own name too. Wouldn't you? It was uncomfortably close to exactly why Trevor went by Christopher Wise professionally. Would Teepees have that option? Would he be able to be anonymous? Trevor suspected that was not an option for the painter. Vlad was famous, and in her own way, so was Lisa. Trevor never paid attention to that sort of thing, but he'd known about Alucard. Adrian's parents, even though Expose never mentioned it. Heck, he remembered the cover of Time magazine with the family on it. Adrian would have been somewhere around 8? His mother had thought the photograph was terribly romantic and kept the thing around until Trevor pushed the grief back down and stepped around the memories. Trevor Belmont was a known name, but his face wasn't. There were very few photographs of him in relation to the Belmont scandal because he'd been a minor at the time, and then because his extended family acted like he'd never been born. The face of Trevor Belmont essentially disappeared within months of what happened, which is why his alias worked. He could have legally changed his name, but he just couldn't bring himself to. It felt like it would be the final disrespect to his mother and father. Despite everything, he had loved them very much. The only ones who kept tabs on him anymore were the authorities, and it was always with questions about the mob and which forgeries remained in circulation. 2 things I know nothing about, he thought bitterly. It was only in the last 2 years, stepping back into the art world, that people had started to associate Trevor Belmont with those Belmonts. Anyway, anyone want to explain to me why it looked like Adrian was going to propose? Does this mean we can all be friends now? Sypha asked, finishing her setup at the easel and looking back at Trevor. Before he could answer, Adrian said softly, I'm still waiting for Trevor to tell me what I need to do to earn his respect. He's in my drawing class, and I need to know that, at the very least, he won't disrupt the class. Sypha's smile was brilliant. Oh, please. Trevor would never do that. Besides, it's an exciting opportunity for him. Her eyes glowed as she looked at Belmont. Adrian taught me everything I know about drawing. He is really gifted at teaching. Somehow he finds a way to explain things and show things to you in a way that no one else can. Unbidden, Trevor thought about Nathan and the trillion explanations on lighting. It seemed to be true. Damn it to hell, Trevor thought. I don't want to promise. His idea of disruption might be, if I talk. He felt both sets of eyes on him and looked at Sypha. There was something about her that always made him not want to let her down. Sypha looked at him like she believed he was a better person than he actually was. Why that should matter to him when literally no one else's opinion did, had him at a total loss. But it did. "I don't have an intention of disrupting the class," Trevor said, crossing his arms. "As I said, if Adrian treats me like any other student, I have no complaints." He turned to Tepes. "I will treat you like any of my other instructors, unless you give me a reason not to." That was fair. If he argued with some of his other instructors too, well, it was that matter of respect again. As though he read Belmont's mind, Adrian stood and asked, "Would I have any opportunity to discuss disagreements outside of the class instead of in front of everyone? I don't care for scenes." Belmont couldn't help it, he sneered. "Oh, indeed, scenes are ever so rude and unseemly. God forbid the society page gets wind of the—" Sypha cleared her throat loudly. "Fuck," Trevor thought. Perhaps to both of their surprise, Adrian snickered. "You sound like my father," he said, struggling to stop his smile. "In his world, God forbid the papers get wind of, well, anything." The blonde sighed, the smile fading away. "Would it help you to understand that I don't want to argue in front of the other students because I don't want Professor Schaff to be involved? He prefers to give this class minimal attention." Trevor's instincts prickled and he latched onto that. "Wait, exactly what does that mean?" "How minimal, Adrian? When will I meet him?" Adrian seemed to tense and gave Trevor a wary glance. Those long fingers twisted in his necklaces. "At some point you will. He'll come observe in the corner of the class from time to time." Trevor opened his mouth and Adrian rushed on. "Look, it's better if you just leave that alone. Please." He was almost pleading again. "And before you get going, can I just say, it is for everyone's sake. He is not a kind or patient man. I've seen him fail students for saying the wrong thing. No matter what you think of me, I can promise you that I will not let him fail you for saying something I don't agree with." This conversation was an utter disaster and he was reeling. Whether it was from the fact that he just told far more about himself and his family than he ever would to a virtual stranger, or Trevor's blatant sexual innuendo and then the searing touch of his hand, or the fact that Adrian was on the verge of admitting that he essentially taught this entire class himself. "If Belmont asks if you grade the class, you must lie," he told himself desperately, and hoped he could manage that simple task. Let's be honest, that is all bad enough, but what you thought about Sypha's incredible suggestion was far worse. Far, far, far worse, he acknowledged. Her suggestion that she watch Belmont and him do something had stunned him. Not because she made it. That was just Sypha. She made sex jokes all the time. No, it shocked him because he liked the idea. The image of an intimate moment with Belmont while Sypha watched and offered guidance had been incredibly charged. He'd seen how it could be. How she might suggest how Belmont could guide things, how Adrian might respond and how they might connect. It was exciting and arousing and completely blindsided him. When Trevor had suggested she might join in, it was like Adrian was seeing her for the first time. His brain just helpfully supplied the image of her fitting between them, around them, with them. It had been perfect, and it suddenly and completely upended his entire world. There was a part of him that was horrified by this. Sypha was his dearest friend, and he couldn't believe he was thinking about this, that his body was reacting with desire to this idea. But another part of him told him that he should have seen this coming. Haven't you always thought she was so beautiful, so adventurous, so free-spirited? Adrian thought to himself. Well, didn't you feel a tiny bit intimidated by her sexual experience and her confidence? You just never gave yourself the chance to think about it, to consider it. I didn't want to ruin what I have with her. I didn't want to be a disappointment. He asked himself with cruel honesty. Okay, yes, fine. I love her. Things are amazing the way they are, and I don't want to fuck it up. I've never been with anyone, and Sypha has several times. This reality had been an easy thing to sidestep. Other than that one night when Sypha had been really drunk, she'd never mentioned anything. He didn't count that night anyway. As tempted as he had been to treat it as an honest invitation, she'd been far too drunk to know what she was doing, and he would never consider anything with anyone in that state. When she'd laughed it off the next day as ridiculous, he'd known there was never any chance and shoved it all away. He was good at that. Then Belmont showed up and his attraction to the man was fierce and hot. Adrian had already been conflicted about Belmont and his feel. No, just attraction, he thought desperately, just attraction. For him. The blonde had worried about how that could work, given that there was an obvious spark between Sypha and Trevor. He'd feared ruining everything if he couldn't resolve his own issues. His best friend's suggestion was an easy and enticing resolution to all of his concerns at once, except that Trevor hated him. Except that he didn't know if Sypha was serious and couldn't risk a misstep if she wasn't. Except that now these images would stay with him and he didn't know what to do about it. Adrian could use 5 minutes to himself to get his head on right. Let's be honest, I could use all day, he thought. All right, Trevor said, bringing Adrian back to the present. If you feel that a disagreement is becoming too disruptive, you can ask me to step into the hallway to discuss it. You want me to treat you like my other instructors? I reserve the right to challenge things I think are wrong. That is something that I do. I'll just bet it is, Adrian thought, but simply said, that is reasonable. I never want any student to feel silenced just because they have a different opinion than mine. Well, unless it is hate speech or bullying another student or something like that. He arched a brow but surprised Trevor by saying, I don't see having that issue with you. Awesome, Sypha chimed in behind them. Adrian, it's time to change. I need to finish this drawing and I only have a little more than an hour now. Hurry up. She came over to peek at Belmont's board, and again, Adrian was intensely curious. Trevor? What are you working on? Adrian was completely torn. He didn't want to be almost naked in front of Trevor. It was a little too vulnerable. Worse, he wasn't sure he could be that unclothed in front of Sypha right now either. He'd never really worried about his briefs before, and now he was very afraid of where his mind might wander. Sypha would notice immediately because she would be sketching him. That would be humiliating. He was diverted from his dilemma when Sypha started talking about Trevor's drawing. Oh, drapes, she exclaimed. Fun, haha, not? Adrian had to grin. Sypha had really struggled with drapes, and they'd both been happy when she finally got a handle on the concept. Oh cool, you made weird faces in there. She pointed at something and looked at Trevor with admiration. That is too cool. I never thought about how creepy they look actually. Creepy faces? Adrian thought, what the heck? He's supposed to be drawing drapes. They both looked up at the TA when he stepped forward to come look. Trevor looked at him and Adrian was surprised to see trepidation on Belmont's face. It's not ready. I need like 30 more minutes. Trevor put a protective hand on the easel. Then I can show you, or, you can see it when you hand it into Shaft for grading. Adrian knew immediately. Trevor knew he was the grader. Oh no, oh no, oh no, he thought. The only other person who knew other than Shaft was Sypha. For a split second he wondered if she told him and discounted it immediately. She would never do that without asking him. He figured it out on his own, Adrian realized. He looked at Trevor and felt a jolt. It was written all over his face. Belmont wasn't going to say anything. Thank you, God, Adrian thought. Although that doesn't explain why he doesn't want me to see it yet. Maybe he just is shy about having his process watched. It wasn't uncommon. Some artists really did better with privacy, although he had a hard time reconciling that with the intense focus Belmont had displayed in class. Unsure how to respond in such a way as to tell Belmont it was all right, he took refuge in humor. Was I not the viewer you had in mind when you told Sypha you like an audience? Oops, too far, he thought, when Belmont blinked and Sypha's jaw dropped. Adrian could feel his cheeks heat and immediately hated his pale skin. Not for the first time. Belmont recovered first. Well, I had suggested your participation, but actually, we could all take turns with watching. Don't want to leave the lady waiting. Trevor's grin was lightning quick. Holy, be careful where you aim that, Adrian thought, dazzled. His smile is stunning when it's for me. Not bad, Tepes. Equality of the sexes is something I am always down for, the sculptor smirked. And that's what I want to hear, Sypha chimed in. Put the words equalities and I'm always down, together, and I'm a happy clam. Adrian, for real, why are you still dressed? Adrian stammered. Sweet Lord, was she serious? They would do this right now? Part of him was terrified, but parting of him, a growing part, was very okay with this idea. Sypha laughed, easy and understanding. Not for sex, although, just let me know, but for the sketch. Seriously, this is due tomorrow, and I have an evening class. Hustle, please! Damn it, Adrian thought, unsure whether to be relieved or more terrified. Just let me know, was she serious? Could he? Go, Addy, for fuck's sake, Sypha said, exasperated. He'd have to think on it later. Adrian resigned himself. Surely he could think unsexy thoughts for an hour. He could do this. Sypha couldn't believe her own daring. Oh! Perhaps it was being with Belmont, who was unabashedly hitting on Adrian while simultaneously giving her winks and suggestive touches. Maybe it was the fact that Adrian hadn't run from the room screaming when Trevor suggested that she could join the two of them. Or maybe it was because she thinks that she may have just stumbled on the fact that Adrian might actually be a little afraid of sex, and that might be the whole problem. That he was hiding behind waiting for the right person, when what he really needed was a gentle, assertive, and caring lover. She could be that when she wanted to be. She couldn't say for sure, but she suspected that Trevor could be that too. Together. Well, they could all be something more. There was a dynamic between them all, and she could really see it now. Sypha could see the possibilities of what they all would bring to the table and what they could give each other, not just in the bedroom, but emotionally and mentally. Sypha had yet to completely plumb the depths of Trevor's story, but she already knew enough that she understood that much of the pain he felt stemmed from a rejection just as sharp as Adrian's had been. Sypha has not experienced rejection like that, but she understood needing to feel accepted for who she was. Adrian had done so without reservation, even the ugly, needy parts of her. She'd already opened up some of that sticky, gooey mess of her secrets to Trevor, and he'd been completely accepting. Sypha had constructed a plan, but it was changing now. She just hoped she was right, or she might ruin her friendship with Adrian. No. Trust your instincts and trust what you saw flash in his eyes when he looked at you and when he looked at Trevor. She was going to, because the potential for happiness for all of them was huge. Taking charge of situations was a familiar role for Sypha, and she was very good at it. It hadn't surprised her when Adrian went to change in the bathroom. Usually, he just stripped in the corner and sauntered over. He had such a funny relationship with his body. It was like he forgot he was observed or desired, until someone commented on his looks or approached him in a sexual manner. He was completely confident and casual until that happened. Then he became embarrassed and shy. She heard the door open behind her and watched Trevor's hand tighten on the side of the easel. He was back to his artwork, insisting he would stay out of the way and leave them alone. When he asked Adrian if he could stay, Sypha was sure it was Trevor's pleas that did it, but who knows? Maybe Adrian felt the barriers crumbling too. Either way, she was certain Trevor would be quiet, but if she didn't catch him staring at Adrian while she was drawing, she would eat her hat. Resisting the knowing grin that wanted to rent space on her face, she turned to Adrian and indicated the plinth under the spotlight. "Remember the pose?" He gave her a small smile and nodded. "Awesome. Go ahead, I'll arrange once you are on." Adrian took a quick peek at her drawing again, and she knew he was refreshing the small details, like which way his hair fell, if his eyes were open, how his fingers lay. Then he quietly took off his robe, sneaking glances over at Belmont, who was drawing like the world was ending. Sypha almost felt sorry for Trevor. She at least knew what was coming, having sketched Adrian several times now. Her best friend laid down and brought his knees up, allowing them to fall naturally to one side while leaving his chest facing the ceiling. He closed his eyes and raked out his hair. Finally, he brought one hand back to his chest and left the other in that golden cloud. The effect was stunning. He looked like a sleeping angel dreaming of his lover. It didn't help that Seb Delisa was playing. The music was seductively hypnotic and poignant, only heightening the impression of otherworldliness. Sypha turned to stand back and took the opportunity to look at Trevor. He had more self-control than she thought. He wasn't looking. Interesting, she thought, and wondered what that meant. She stood and came over to correct Adrian's left arm and bring the far side of his hair into a more triangular pattern. All set, she thought, standing back to look. She turned suddenly, and that's when she saw the stare. Her hat was safe, but if Adrian could see Belmont's face, her best friend would know that he wasn't. Belmont tore his gaze from Adrian and looked at her. She looked at Trevor. An understanding passed between them. Trevor held up his phone and pointed at her. She nodded and took out hers. "Go!" His text popped up. "We need to talk." Sypha looked up and grinned. "Yeah." She could literally see the tension drain out of Belmont, and he grinned back. "Yes," she wrote back, "we definitely should talk."